Hello, everyone. Jonathan Alfonso. Thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel. Today, I'm joined by Adrian Foley. He's one of the attorneys that works at Title Answers. He's also a licensed realtor and has his license with eXp Realty. So I'm, honored to have Adrian with us here today, sharing his perspective from both the attorney standpoint and his experience as a realtor. So I asked Adrian to join me today because I wanted to cover a topic which I think is very important, which is, mistakes we're seeing sellers make when coming to market. By now you've probably seen our other video about the housing crash, how I don't think there's any housing crash because the market is so crazy. So Adrian and I started to talk about, just everything that we're seeing. So Adrian, how are you doing today?
Doing all right. Thanks for having me.
I thought we would just dive right into it, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna go with what's the first mistake that I'm seeing, right? And I'm seeing this especially from the title standpoint is, sellers are listing their property and they have no idea where they're going. Like they're just like, market's crazy, and I'm gonna put my house on the market and find one of these quote unquote suckers that I'm hearing about that are out there. And then they start to get a bunch of offers. Their open house is flooded with people, and now they're like, oh my god, like where am I going to go? And I've had a bunch of buyers who have had me review a contract. They're like, yeah, seller's going to accept it. And then they're like, yeah, seller took the house off the market. Are you seeing the same thing, or?
Yeah. I mean, Jonathan, I think the flip side of that is the reason why we're seeing so few homes for sale is that most people don't know where they're going to go once they list their home. So, on the one hand, you have people who've thought about it and they're thinking, man, what am I going to do once I sell my home? I have no idea where I'm going to go. And then there's other people who I think are overwhelmed by the amount of attention their home is getting, especially within the first week. I mean, just so far at the beginning of this year, as an example, like the Coral Gables market, single family homes there are listing and going under contract within 2 days. So it's just a very active market. There's a lot of buyer demand right now. So yeah, I think sellers need to kind of get on board with not only preparing themselves but also having a little bit of a reality check when they do go to market. So we're talking about demand. We're talking about where our sellers going to go. When it comes to the reality check, it's I think sellers need to be really well versed and well educated when it comes to understanding value and market momentum. Sellers are getting top dollar right now. The market's in their favor, but at the same time, sellers need to understand that buyers have never been better informed than now, especially buyers working with a good agent. And they're not just going to pay ridiculous, outrageous prices for your home because of the lack of inventory.
I beg to differ. I mean, I'm hearing people tell me, no, there's these New Yorkers and they're loaded and they're just going to give me all this money for my property. I mean, you're
Yeah,
not seeing that. What do you mean? I mean, that's what people
we're
are telling
seeing
me.
yeah, we're seeing top dollar that sellers are getting, but homes that are not, I guess, up to market expectations, they're not selling. So, great example is if you're trying to list a home at 1.5 million, and it's a dated home, it needs hurricane windows. It needs simple updates that buyers are looking for. It's going to sit on the market for a while. Just because there's a lack of inventory doesn't mean that buyers necessarily are going to overpay for your property. And that's especially the case where we see FISBOs or for sale by owners. Those homes are sitting there forever because they haven't taken the time to sit down with a professional and have a professional tell them, hey, this is how you should get your home ready for market.
Well, and I think that just comes down to, right, like, yes, people are right now, they understand, they're willing to pay a premium, right? It's no different than someone going to the mall and buying a luxury good, right? Like, yeah, a purse is a purse. Some people are willing to pay a little bit more for quality, but I think, what I've seen, and I mean, I'm telling you, I saw it 2 weeks ago. I came in on a Monday morning and we just had I was going through my emails, and listen, at the end of the day, we're in the business of doing title. We're in the business of closing files. I just had cancellation after cancellation after cancellation, and after talking
Right.
through all the buyers, the buyers are paying absolute top dollar. So they're doing their inspection. There's all these things wrong with the property, and the seller's position is like, oh well, if you want it, you got to deal with it, and then they're now back to market. I mean, if somebody's going to pay that premium, you have to justify that premium to an extent.
Right.
Are you can't just assume that because the market's crazy, someone is just gonna throw a number, that's 30% above what you should get.
Yeah, and you're bringing up a good point. I mean, we're talking about what sellers can do in terms of that reality check. Let's talk a little bit about what they can do to kind of get ready for market, right? So first, always talk to professional and get ready for the market. But things like getting your home ready in terms of decluttering, taking the right photos, and creating the right marketing content. But a big one that I'd suggest now to avoid the situation you're bringing up is do a pre-listing inspection. Right now, you're dealing with buyers who feel all the stresses of a very competitive market. In a lot of situations, a buyer, by the time they go under contract in a home, that's likely not the first home they've made a contract offer on. So they're dealing with a lot of stress. It's a hyper tense situation. A seller who's done a pre-listing inspection and knows what may or may not be a big deal in the house and has addressed those before they go under contract with a buyer is going to be in a much better position to kind of take away that stress and the potential cancellation during the inspection period.
Yeah. And, I think that brings us to our next point, right? Which is vetting the buyers, right? Because if you've done all those steps, right, one of two things is going to happen. Either you're coming to market, and now if you don't properly vet your buyers, or you don't start having the right, questions to ask, and really this isn't done by the seller. This is going to be done by their professional. So it should be a conjunction of their attorney, their realtor, who's involved. But if you're not vetting the buyers, because what's going to happen now is, you're going to get 50 offers. And the easiest thing to say is, well, let's pick the highest offer. And, I think what people are not understanding is the dynamics of the market, and the easiest way. And I want to explain this in the simplest terms for those of you watching us out there. But let's say, for example, a realtor would value the property at 500K. Nobody is going to disagree with you that you can push the envelope and say, hey, we can ask 510, 515. The reality is we don't know what the market is going to give you, right? Where at what point are people going to stop raising their paddles and bidding for your property? Now, that sweet spot also depends on what can that person afford, because buyers are showing up. They want to say all the right things, right? They know they got to stand out amongst 50 people. So you kind of need to vet their financials, vet their realtor, vet their situation. How serious are they? I mean, are they really doing it, or do they just want to win the auction battle? Because what ends up happening is if you're not working with the right type of buyer, and there's not that motivation, and everything isn't aligned, right? As soon as you get under contract, what is that buyer trying to do? They're trying to bring that price right back down. So now you have kind of like this tug of war. You as the seller, you're trying to hold on to every last dollar, and the buyer's trying to bring you back down, which is what you were saying, right? They're trying to use a listing inspection against you, and they're trying to use that inspection to bring you down. They're trying to find whatever's wrong with the community. They're trying to bring up issues that, were unforeseen. If you're taking long to find your next property, well, I may lose my rate. I need money. So you kind of want to make sure you're working with the right buyer. I mean,
Yeah.
Would you agree, or?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, one of the great things about the Miami community is that when it comes to different realtors in the market, professionals working in the market tend to know each other. They tend to know who's easy to work with and who's reasonable. An ideal situation would be that you have a vigorous advocacy for both sides between the agents, and they get to a contract price with the understanding that an inspection is so that the buyer is informed. And if there's any serious issue, then of course it gets dealt with, but it's not seen as an opportunity for another bite at the apple, or something to try to create issues in order to push a price back down, especially in this market. It's not really going to work. Let me ask you this: what would you recommend to a seller in terms of what they should be evaluating from a potential buyer?
I mean, look, I'm definitely scrutinizing their financials, right? I'm definitely doing a deep dive into, can they afford these offers? Because, they're trying to say, we're waiving appraisal, we're doing this, but how, can they get there financially, right? The other thing that I'm doing is, and going back to you and what you're saying about the market is, who's the other person? I'm looking at 40 offers now, right? Let's say I'm on the seller side. I want to work with somebody that I know their reputation. I know what they do. Do they come from a reputable company? Do they have a bad rep? Like, I know people that I can, I see them on transactions, and I know we can work through things. And, there's this misconception out there that people have, which is like, oh, I paid my realtor, I paid him 3%, let's say, whatever, $1 million deal. He made 30 grand. And, that guy just had to do a couple showings and then show up at my closing. People don't understand that prior to that deal, you probably had several hundred conversations with people, which is what gives you the feeling for the market, helps you
Right.
understand what's going on, gives you that rapport. I mean, I can't tell you how many files I step on where I call the person on the other side and I'm like, hey, what's up? Recently I had one where the agent called me and was like, I'm having this issue. I'm like, let me call so and so. I took care of it, and people, don't underestimate that. You want to vet who are these people, what's their motivation, what's their timeline, do they have an urgency to move, or are they comfortable where they're at and they're okay, like if they end up winning, what these terms that they're offering. So it's kind of evaluating
So what kind
that
of
package.
information and this is because I think a lot of times sellers and buyers included, they don't understand what they're allowed to ask for or what is reasonable, just in industry practice. So if you're representing a seller and you're going to ask for information, is it reasonable to ask for proof of funds? Is it reasonable to ask for more than just a pre-approval letter from a lender? What do you think is reasonable for sellers to ask, and what should buyers expect to show up ready to provide to a seller?
Well, listen, first of all, let's caveat this with, there are fair housing guidelines. So you have to be
Right.
careful how you ask it. So it has to be, whatever it is that you do has to be uniform. So let's start through from there.
Very
But,
good point. Yeah.
you absolutely want to ask them for, you want to ask for the proof of funds if it's a cash offer.
Mhm.
If it's financing, you want to get that pre-qual. The next thing is, it's custom down here where you ask for, the proof of the DU or whatever they used to evaluate. That gets into another sticky situation, which is
Right.
a lot of people don't realize that DU you're technically not entitled to. So the buyer has to agree to release it. I just think it's an unfortunate situation, because if you're in a buyer, I, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to lift your skirt and
Yeah.
show everything, because they want to peek under the hood to understand, can you get there. I mean, the other unfortunate reality is every lender in Miami will spew out a pre-qual letter in 2 seconds just based off financials. So I think you need to get all that information, and to an extent, get a field. Does this story jive?
Yeah.
Does this make sense, or are they concealing something here? Because the reality is, there's always that saying, like, buyers are liars, but I think more than ever now, buyers are trying to say all the right things,
Yeah.
because you're competing against 50 people. There's no room for error. Everything has to look, everything has to look very, very good on paper. Otherwise, you're disqualified from the get-go.
Yeah,
Um,
it's definitely a tough market for buyers, and it's good that you listed that for them, because I think I know for me a lot of times when I work with buyers, it's sometimes it's a surprise to them when you say, "Hey, this is kind of normal for people to ask you for this information," especially when it comes to proof of funds. I mean, people generally don't like to give their financial information, so that's good that you summarize it. So, Jonathan, leaving, just to summarize today, if we're leaving people, viewers, with kind of just tips and little tidbits, what are the 5 things from today's conversation that you think they should walk away with understanding about the market and being ready right now?
Well, listen, they have to understand, like, what we've gone over, right? One, have a plan of what you're going to do. Two, you know what I'm saying? Have realistic expectations. If you're
Yeah.
a seller, there's no better time to push the envelope, but let's not go into la la land here either. You have to do that. Three, understand how much work it's going to take, right? Understand that you need to put in the work. You're not going to demand this very high number without having to put in some work yourself. Number four, get ready to put in the work, vetting all these people and trying to figure out. And then I think, the fifth one, which we really didn't touch, we didn't really touch upon, but we need to discuss is, because it always comes self-serving when we do these YouTube videos to be like, you need an attorney, you know what I'm saying? Because, unfortunately, every realtor out there wants to be in sales. So, I think there's no greater lie than the lie that, realtors have perpetuated of, like, oh, attorneys are deal killers. The reality is
Yeah.
realtors don't want to be, checked by somebody else. So they want full control, and anybody that may have an opposing viewpoint, they try to shut up. But if
Yeah.
you're in a transaction, you need proper representation. The other thing that I'm seeing now is, Once the file goes under contract, you're off the market. Chances are, if you're moving to another property, you got that stress. You need to, you're getting top dollar for your property. If you've managed to get your next property under contract, there's a lot of stress. If you don't have an attorney there to help you on the sales side, which, by the way, like our attorney representation on residential starts at $950, right? So usually for less than $2,000, right?
Yeah.
An individual has us there to manage that process, to manage whatever the buyer's saying, because if the buyer starts having issues, if the buyer's taking long, it's costing you money. The more money it's going, plus the worst thing that can happen to you in this market is having to come back to market. Because if you already, kind of push the envelope, you got that super high number, whatever, you went to market at 500, your realtor got you 525, you come back to market, you're tarnished goods. Everybody's wondering what's wrong with this property. And now you may end up even less than your original number of 500. So, having us there to review everything that the buyer says, make sure that they're not asking for unreasonable things, pushing the file along, sending demands. And if they're not staying in line, letting them know, hey, worst case scenario, we don't want to, but we're going to have to make a claim on that deposit, But if you're just saying, well, my realtor says, just let the buyer's title company do my docs, and I'm just going to pay a minimal fee for that. Well, guess what? You think the buyer's title company is going to come to you and say, hey, by the way, this file has a lot of issues and we're not going to close on time? No, you're going to call and they're going to tell you we're right on track. Everything's okay.
So that's all great. Also, those are all really good points for the end consumer and the buyer, the seller that we're trying to help out. But also, this is for realtors as well. There's a lot of times where we find ourselves in a situation where you're actually helping the realtor get through their negotiation or address a difficult issue that comes up when you're in contract. There's a lot of value in kind of providing that kind of guidance to help somebody get it done and keep a deal together so that we're going to get to the closing table, rather than having not having cooler heads prevail and having something fall apart over something that could have been avoided.
Yeah, and even simpler than that, right? For all the realtors that are out there, what are realtors good at? Realtors are good at sourcing deals, finding leads, talking to their buyers and sellers, and moving files along. When it comes to these legal issues, or when it gets feisty, no offense to all the realtors that are watching out there, I love you guys, but you guys suck at this. The majority of you are not built for negotiating these legal nuances. What threat? Nothing cracks me up more than a realtor calling me and telling me, like, what are you going to do? Like, if you're going to do something, have your client go hire an attorney at $350 an hour and let's manage this. So you're spending all this time, now with the situation that you can't really manage, where if you took those 10 to 15 hours that it takes you, because for me, it'll probably take me 3 or 4 emails and I can resolve the issue. If you're a realtor, you got a lot of back and forth, a lot of pointless conversations, which is time that you could be lead generating. That's the way I see it.
It's also understanding when something is a real serious legal issue and when something's not. And I think that's the benefit of having a law degree and, taking the bar exam and passing it and being licensed. There's a lot of knowledge that comes with that. I think a lot of times people don't understand. So yeah, it's a really good point about realtors, maybe sometimes blowing something up and going a little too far with an issue, but yeah.
Yeah. Listen, Adrian, I totally agree. And, listen, all I can say is, for those of you out there, if you're thinking about selling your home, buying your home, before you do anything, Adrian and I reach out to either one of us. Adrian, how can they get in touch with you?
So look, they can find me on all social media at Adrian J. Foley, or you can check me out on my website, adrianfoley.com. They can also, of course, find me on the Title Answers website under attorneys.
Yep. And same with us, Title Answers. We're Title Answers on basically all social media, or you can give us a call at the office, 305-982-7857. Any questions you have, we would love to help you. Adrian, thank you for joining me, and let's do another one of these soon.
Sounds good.
Take care, everyone.